Imagine a moment when a king, the most powerful in his nation, drops all formalities and throws himself into an intense, unexpected celebration. That was David, on one of the most remarkable days of his reign, dancing fervently before the Ark of the Covenant while his people watched in astonishment. But what led a king to set aside his crown and engage in such an open display of devotion? What really happened behind the scenes of this event, and why has this celebration remained etched in Israel's history forever? Get ready to dive into a fascinating episode that revealed the essence of King David, transforming him even more in the eyes of his people. This won't just be a story about faith, but about courage, criticism, and transformation. David was in a moment of great celebration and achievement. As the new king of Israel, he had a clear mission: unite the people under God's presence. The Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized God's presence among the people, was on its way to Jerusalem. David's decision wasn't just a religious one. It was a strategic move to unify the tribes and centralize power in the newly established capital. Bringing the Ark to Jerusalem meant far more than a simple relocation. It was a statement that Jerusalem would now be the spiritual and political center of the nation. The Ark, until then kept away from the city, represented the direct connection between God and Israel. Aware of its significance, David knew that this event would bring countless blessings to the people and ensure the prosperity of his reign. The choice of Jerusalem as the new home of the Ark solidified the city as a sacred place, something that would unite the people around a common purpose. David was ecstatic, knowing that this moment would not only strengthen the faith of the Israelites, but also solidify his leadership and legacy. The journey of the Ark to Jerusalem wasn't easy. It involved a whole logistical and ceremonial apparatus, and David personally oversaw every detail. This was an event of unparalleled magnitude for the time, and each step of the Ark's journey to the city was met with reverence and anticipation by the people. Despite his authority, the king showed humility and devotion by actively participating in the process. He knew that the Ark's presence in Jerusalem would secure God's favor over the kingdom and strengthen it for the challenges ahead. As the Ark finally neared Jerusalem, the people were ecstatic. It was as if the physical presence of God was entering the city. Songs, shouts of joy, and reverence filled the air, creating a unique atmosphere. For David, seeing the Ark enter the city was the realization of a divine dream. His faith was renewed, and his heart overflowed with gratitude. However, what no one expected was the way David would express his devotion in front of everyone. The excitement was just beginning. The enthusiasm David felt was contagious, and he knew that something extraordinary was about to happen. When the Ark finally entered the gates of Jerusalem, the king couldn't contain his joy. He was about to do something that not even his closest advisors could have predicted. When the Ark finally crossed the gates of Jerusalem, David did something that took everyone by surprise. Dressed in a simple tunic, he began dancing before the Ark, not caring what others thought. The king, who was supposed to be the epitome of dignity and authority, gave himself completely to the celebration, showing genuine devotion. His dance wasn't meant to impress anyone but was a pure expression of gratitude to God. David, who had already achieved so much, showed that above all he was a servant before God. The crowd watched in awe and joy. For the people, seeing their king dance in this way was a sign of humility and true worship. He wasn't concerned with maintaining royal composure or preserving his image of authority. David stood before his God, and that was all that mattered at that moment. He knew that the Ark of the Covenant symbolized God's presence in Israel, and his dance was a demonstration of how much he valued and recognized that presence. His devotion was contagious. As he danced, the people joined in the celebration, praising God with songs and shouts of joy. The entire city of Jerusalem seemed to vibrate with the energy of that moment. David was not just leading as a king, but also as a worshiper, guiding his people in one of the most memorable celebrations of his reign. The music, songs, and dance created an atmosphere that transcended the moment, leaving a lasting mark on the history of Israel. But despite the joy that filled the people, not everyone saw David's actions the same way. While the king danced before the Ark, with a heart full of gratitude, There were those who viewed his behavior differently. David, however, was completely immersed in his devotion. He wasn't dancing to be seen by men, but to please God, and that gave him the freedom to act without restraint. His simplicity at that moment showed the people that even as king he was subject to divine greatness. David's dance wasn't just a spontaneous gesture, but a public demonstration of his faith and submission. He knew that many kings cared more about their appearances and prestige, but for him, God was above all. It was a clear declaration. True royal power comes from God, and the greatest honor for a king is to be a faithful servant to him. His dance, unpretentious and full of fervor, would forever mark the beginning of a new era in Israel. While David danced with fervor and devotion before the ark, his wife Michal watched from a window in the palace. But unlike the crowd who saw the gesture as an act of humility and surrender, Michal saw something very different. To her, David's behavior was unworthy of a king. She felt ashamed to see her husband, the king of Israel, dancing without any pomp or formality, wearing a simple tunic and exposing himself before everyone like a common man. In Michal's eyes, David's posture was an affront to royal dignity. When David returned to the palace, Michal didn't hide her displeasure. She confronted him directly, criticizing him for acting in a way that, in her view, disrespected him as the leader of the people. Michal believed that a king should maintain his posture, his authority, and never lower himself to dance in such a way, especially in front of the servants. Her words were harsh, full of disdain for what she considered a loss of dignity. But David, instead of justifying himself, responded with the firmness of someone who knew where his true loyalty lay. David's response was clear and direct. He didn't dance for men, nor to impress or maintain appearances. His dance, he explained, was an offering of devotion to the Lord, the God who had chosen him, who took him from the pasture where he cared for sheep and placed him on the throne of Israel. If that meant humbling himself before the people, he would do even more without hesitation. To David, pleasing God was infinitely more important than keeping up appearances before men. He was willing to go further, to humble himself even more if necessary, for he knew his kingship depended on God, not on his clothes or posture. This conflict revealed not only the different perceptions of what it meant to be a king, but also the deep differences between David and Michal. To David, being a king meant above all being a servant of God. To Michal, royalty required distance, dignity, and control over appearances. This clash between devotion and appearance created a barrier between them, a division that would echo for a long time in their relationship. Michal's criticism, though it didn't shake David's faith, left deep scars in their marriage. David's attitude, on the other hand, was a powerful example for the people. He showed that true greatness doesn't lie in power, royal garments, or the opinions of others, but in a heart devoted to God. Even in the face of criticism from his own wife, David remained firm in his faith, aware that his true kingship came from above. Michal's reaction, on the other hand, showed how pride can blind us to what really matters. With the Ark of the Covenant finally established in Jerusalem, the city began to experience a new era of blessings and prosperity. For David, the Ark's presence wasn't just a religious symbol, but the physical manifestation of God's covenant with Israel. The Ark brought a sense of security and divine favor that seemed to envelop the entire nation. For the people, knowing the Ark was so close was a cause for great joy and reverence, and it further united the tribes of Israel under David's leadership. The arrival of the Ark also solidified Jerusalem as the spiritual center of Israel. The city, once seen only as a political capital, now became the religious heart of the people. David knew this was a crucial step in strengthening his leadership and uniting the scattered tribes. The Ark's presence made everyone look to Jerusalem as the place where God was truly present. This moment marked the beginning of a new era of faith and devotion in Israel. David's dance before the Ark also left a lasting mark on the kingdom. It was a gesture of humility and faith that the people would never forget. The king, by presenting himself as a servant before God, established a new type of leadership in Israel. He wasn't just a warrior or a political strategist. He was someone deeply committed to his faith and God's will. This made the people follow him, not just for his authority, but for his genuine devotion. This moment became a model of spiritual leadership, something that would shape Israel's future. However, the blessings brought by the ark also came with responsibilities. David knew that God's presence demanded faithfulness and obedience. He committed himself to follow God's commandments with more fervor than ever, knowing that Israel's prosperity depended on his devotion. The city thrived, alliances grew stronger, and blessings multiplied. But David also understood that with divine favor came challenges, and he needed to be prepared to lead with wisdom and discernment. The Ark of the Covenant, now secure in Jerusalem, represented the continuation of God's promise to Israel. David, as the chosen leader, knew that his role went far beyond politics. He was the mediator between God and the people, and that required a life of devotion and sacrifice. Israel's future was bright, and the ark's presence was the guarantee that God was walking with them. David's faith was solidified, and the people saw him as a leader not just of power, but of spirituality. Israel's future was secure, with God at the center of everything. Now that you know the surprising episode of how David danced like never before God, we can reflect on the true meaning of leadership and devotion. David showed us that to achieve great things, we must first surrender completely to what truly matters. What impact will this have on your life and your own choices? Continue this journey of discovery and reflection, and if you want to dive even deeper into biblical stories, don't miss our special playlist on the story of angels in the Bible. Click and see how these celestial beings played crucial roles in key moments of sacred history.